it, and we only have to win. The upside may not be as great as it is if you invested early in Uber,
Yeah.
but you don't have to win many to do well, right?
All right, so we're about to start. Typically we just do this little countdown.
Yeah.
Nick, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, we are live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, welcome to another delicious and nutritious episode of Silicon Zombies, where you'll find the best brains in the Bay and beyond. That's right, we connect live with brilliant innovators, thinkers, and entrepreneurs to demystify emerging tech and empower our community with fantastic brains. So super jazzed to have you join us today. It's Tuesday, January 17th. My name is Nick Larson.
And I'm Peter Wang, brand community manager of Intel and also overall social media.
Guru, rockstar, savant. And super excited to have a couple sponsors we want to give a shout out today. Specifically, we've got Nicodex. If you're looking to build a product, check out Nicodex.com. These guys have done fantastic work for our community, like Bazinta, SidePocket, and they start at just $25 an hour. That's NECODEX.com for building any kind of product. And Primero Negocios, which they'll help you get local customers, and they're rock stars at digital marketing. So super pleased to have a couple wonderful guests today. Mr. Jimmy Koo, growth expert and all-around wonderful human being, and Steve Weimer as well, another rock star as well. So
And another wonderful human being.
yeah, that's right.
I don't know about wonderful.
And so Jimmy, let's start with you. There's connectors, there's super connectors, and then there's people like you. You've raised over $500 million for founders. You're scaling a unicorn in the payment system. You've done a bunch of angel investments, and you're about to have your second baby. You got a lot going on. How do you congratulations. How do you
the
manage
grand
that?
total of 2 hours yesterday. So that's how I managed part of it. But it's a really exciting time. It's a really exciting time in the payment space. So that's where I work on my day job. I'm the head of growth for what we call our developed markets at Flutterwave. Flutterwave is Africa's largest payment infrastructure. So happy to talk more about the opportunities in Africa. We've got experts here who I'm sure we can talk more about some of the opportunities and why there's such a growth opportunity there. And like you said, one of the things I love to do, and this is something that I've been doing for many, many years, ever since we've known each other and beyond, it's just I love connecting people. I found that if you connect two really good people and you're helping both people and you're the person who was able to do so, it's a great thing. And that kind of superpower, if you will, seems to be particularly helpful when it comes to fundraising. So I've run an accelerator. I was recruited by Justin Kahn to help build up this team called Fundraise Concierge, where we helped more companies. And like you said, over the last 5 years, I've now helped companies raise over $540 million in addial funding.
Yeah, no big deal.
Been busy.
That's remarkable. So you're a great storyteller, but you're also a great story listener. Do you think those two things play together when bringing two folks together to be able to do business?
Yeah, I think the story is particularly important when it comes to fundraising. 99% of the hard work is what the founders doing, building their company. But that 1%, that story, how they actually vocalize what they're doing and how they present it to investors, folks like yourselves and others, is very, very important, because if you don't understand what they're doing, you're not going to invest, right? So that storytelling component is what I found was the most helpful thing, actually, that when talking to founders, is helping them get that story correct.
Got it. And part of that, I guess from the investor's standpoint, is like due diligence, or kind of figuring out what problem they're solving. Like, what do you see as been effective?
Yeah, I'm also a venture partner at 10x Capital, which is actually the most active investor in the US at the moment, according to PitchBook. And so we talk to a lot of companies. There's a couple of key things, but usually like the earlier stages, I think what's most important is what is the problem you're really trying to solve? Is there kind of a true need for that? How are you solving it? Do I believe in what you're building? Who are you? Are you the right people to go solve this problem? Yeah. So I think that's really important. As the company grows, as they expand, I think any of the important metrics that showcase that they have something truly there some product market fit. Those are important metrics. Revenue, obviously, retention, growth. Those are important things to consider from the companies that we speak to.
Yeah, it's interesting because like storytelling, you think it's kind of like a soft skill, but you can fortify it with a foundation of data to give more credibility.
Oh, for
Speaking of communication experts, we've got Steve Weimer here, who's been vice president of communications at a number of different Fortune 100 companies. Tell us a little bit about your approach to communication when it comes to business.
Yeah, it's interesting that Jimmy mentioned storytelling because clearly that's important as a founder tries to seek additional capital and grow their company. It's even maybe more important in helping connect that product fit with the consumer who's going to buy a product or a service. But I actually find as a person who sort of found my way into a real deep and abiding passion for Africa and particularly East African entrepreneurs, that there's still a big story to be told about emerging markets. And particularly in Africa, where I have my heart sort of, I left a little piece of my heart there every time I went. Particularly in Africa, there's not a deep understanding of the true market opportunity. And we've wasted a lot of money, the Western world, and now, and I think China prior to that, we've wasted a lot of money on various aid models that haven't worked. Dambisa Moyo wrote a book about probably a decade ago called Dead Aid, essentially making what at the time was a very controversial statement that aid doesn't work. And I'm not sure I fully agree with that because there's certain things like President George W. Bush's Millennial Project that essentially eradicated AIDS from much of the African continent. So I think in terms of healthcare and some of those areas, there is still a really big need for just flat out aid. When there's a hungry person, we need to feed them.
Sure.
But I personally believe that the pathway to a greater emergence of just equity and reduction of poverty and better thriving in life in Africa is really directly related to commerce and jobs and economic opportunity. And so I would love to be a champion for the story that I'm really convinced of, that Africa is ripe for making money, for commerce, employing people, and ultimately making the societies there better, less corrupt, less run by dictators, more equal in terms of gender discrimination, and just more opportunity in general. And I think the opportunities there are bursting. And I hope that as governments, developed countries decide that where the plates are aid money, that they do less in handouts to governments and more in sparking entrepreneurship and loosening the chains around just this sort of concept that Africa is still the country that we might have thought of it 100 years ago. Or the continent, I should say. It's not a country. Where you're going to Africa, like it's a big continent.
What we say at Flutterwave is Africa is not a country. We want to make it feel like one. You're absolutely right. It's 50 plus countries. There's different currencies. There's different languages. There's different nuances. There's regulatory environments, compliance. It's completely different. And so when people think about that and think of it as one bulk thing, they're just missing out on a true understanding of what the opportunity is and also how complex it is.
Totally. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with Flutterwave, diving right into the Africa thing. How are you thinking about growth and what have been some of the hurdles that you had to overcome?
So Steve's 100% right. The growth opportunity is immense. 8 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world right there. Right. So there's a tremendous opportunity. There's a lot of different things that are happening now that make it even a larger opportunity for companies seeking to grow. And you mentioned one of those. It's getting infrastructure support. There's money going into it. I think there's billions getting put into just building infrastructure, but also just the political environment, regulatory environment. Things are working towards being much more commerce friendly, much more business friendly. So those are all positives. There's also a much faster growing younger population that's mobile. There's a larger and growing middle class and upper class, 580 million, kind of middle class, 116 million, kind of upper class, 1.7 billion people. So there's a tremendous market there. So what have I been doing, basically? As the person who's in charge of our growth for the developed markets, essentially what I'm looking for are merchants that want to tap into that growing opportunity. So I need to find those merchants that want to go out there. But when they want to go out there, the difficulty is if you can't receive money from your customer, you cannot do business there. So what does Flutterwave do? We're the pipes that help receive money, pay money,
Sure.
move money, that whole ability, the payment space, that's what we do. So I've been talking to companies like Netflix and Uber and Microsoft and TikTok and Twitter and other big organizations like that see the opportunity, see the potential, want to be a part of it, and we help them with the payment infrastructure for them to be able to address it.
What are some of the things that they're afraid of, maybe things that they can't control?
I think the biggest thing, and I don't know if you agree, Steve, is it's just complicated. So maybe they don't know which particular countries to go into. They don't know what the complexities are. They know there's growth opportunities there. So actually, some of the conversations I've had is really just providing education. It's providing information
Right.
and helping them dictate or provide insights that will help their strategy for Africa.
Probably not so different from the US. It's like the education piece.
Yeah,
The need for education.
I think there's multiple layers to this, right? Because just think about it in terms of the scenario he just described. If you had the premise, by the way, in a country like Kenya, there's massive smartphone penetration. I mean, we're talking, 50% of the population with a smartphone. You wouldn't think that elsewhere. Now, their smartphones are a little different. They're not rocking iPhone 14s at scale like we are here in the Valley, but they're smartphones, right? So let's just say you're Netflix and you think, okay, if I could put together some content that will appeal to Kenyans, would I be interested in the Kenyan market or the Ethiopian market or the South African market, right? And by the way, there's tons of content that's in English originally that gets captioned, and I mean, there's a lot of appeal to content, and even the English content in much of East Africa in particular, all across the continent. Yeah. So if you want to do that, it wouldn't be that hard to determine whether or not you thought there was a consumer demand for the thing, the product, Uber, Netflix. But then to Jimmy's point, how do you actually custom? You collect a dollar, if it's a U.S. company, a U.S. dollar in another form of currency without a way to transact. You don't go online and put your credit card number in for Netflix when you're in even in middle class Nairobi, right? Yeah. So there's a major gap here. So I think it's important to look at it in terms of what does the market want? What is the market ready for? Then how could the market consume this product? That's where Jimmy's solving a gap, right? And then you could keep drilling down. Then okay, if Netflix is in demand and people want to stream it, is the broadband capability there, right? If the broadband capability is not there, all of these things sort of cycle up, right? Mm-hmm. But I'll give you one quick anecdote. Sure. Africa's skipping terrible American technology where we've got wires on poles all over America. There are people using internet to work from home, school kids trying to get their homework done online. Right. They're using telephone wires that were strung in the 70s. And literally, now Moore's Law is letting us click more little bits down the line faster together than we ever did before. But at the end of the day, we're still using a lot of really antiquated infrastructure here. And in Africa, they're going wireless. And I bet on it, right? So how can you bring rural 5G? T-Mobile's got a huge rural 5G initiative right now all across America. It could be strung all the way across Africa. And so there's a lot of ways to think about how can we get there quicker by doing it better based on what we know now. You're not going to open up a traditional taxi business in Kigali, but you might be able to find ride sharing. Right. Yeah. And Jimmy's, if he's enabling the payments to do that, it opens up a massive opportunity for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, let me give you the story of Netflix that you were just talking about as well. So there's definitely a demand. People want to watch it. And to your point, there's also the broadband consideration. But if I want to watch Netflix collects your credit card, you and I and everyone else. But if I don't have a credit card, first of all, I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for it, period. You don't take M-Pesa, you don't take mobile wallets. That's a problem already. Even if you do take credit cards, there's local credit cards. There's also the issue that if my credit card is in Nigeria, in Nigerian currency, it's not going to work. It's just going to fail. Right. So there's all these issues that come about. So what was actually happening for consumers there? They had to figure out a way to get access to Netflix. So either they would ask someone like a family member or a friend who's local. Here, Nick, hey, can you sign up for Netflix and add me as a person who can watch it? Sure. And I will pay you. Now, how do I pay you? Maybe it's remittances, maybe it's, I don't know, something else. But maybe, right?
Is crypto part of the solution that you guys are looking at?
Oh, crypto's a whole other kind of words and a whole other conversation.
3 more shows?
That is a much longer conversation, but very shortly, crypto technically banned in Nigeria. Nigeria is also working on their own digital currency.
Probably centralized though, which defeats the whole purpose.
Well, kind of, but they're still good to what they're building there as well. But the thing is, when you look at the largest Bitcoin markets, it's the U.S., it's Russia, Nigeria's third. So you can say it's
Third?
banned.
Wow.
It's
Nigeria's
third.
a
It's a
behemoth.
huge market.
Wow.
And people don't even realize how large it is. So the use case there is huge. But back to the Netflix example, I would actually have to go find someone who I know in the US who would pay for it, that I then have to find a way to pay them back. Or I'd have to find a way to get access to a US credit card, which you cannot get in Nigeria. So good luck.
Right.
Or I find a debit card to pay for it, but then I have to find a way to keep making sure there's money on that debit card. So it's not easy,
Wow.
but people were doing that. So the demand was clearly there. People were finding creative ways to just pay for it. Now, imagine if I just made it easier. Put in your M-Pesa wallet. Go ahead, pay for that.
Mhm.
Put in your local Verve credit card. Go ahead. Pay by your bank, right? If I made it easier, that opens up tremendous opportunities for Netflix and other companies in a market that clearly wants their products.
So it sounds like you're also building the infrastructure. needed.
We are the
Yeah, it is.
financial infrastructure. Yeah, absolutely.
But the
Yeah.
reason this is the reason this is the biggest, most important thing that no one's talking about in emerging markets is that mostly we think of a product market fit, and we think of the consumers. So let's pick a market. We're in Uganda. Okay. Do Ugandans need a mobile ticketing for the bus systems in Kampala? Do they need that? That's something that we can all suppose they probably need.
Mhm.
And if you are a Ugandan and you're there, you definitely know if they need that. But how do you actually transact on it? And how do you use an outside investment? Because you're not going to be able to move to Kampala and buy 60 buses and run up and down the area, right? So you're going to need people that are local.
You want to solve an
That
African
local
problem,
knowledge.
get an African.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're not bringing some American or British or French solution to solve it all. You have to have a local contextualization, or
Yeah.
we're all going to just bleed money for no reason and waste investors' money, and it's for naught. The problem is that we focus often on the product and whether or not we think the product's in demand, and we don't actually have a way to transact. Right?
Because I feel like we kind of take that for granted.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
We do. Of course,
We
we do.
absolutely do.
Right? What
And because
founder
of that,
out
we
there?
don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what founder out there right now building an internet business is worried they won't be able to get paid? They won't
Right.
actually have, and I don't mean that like collecting on the bill. I mean they don't actually have a transaction platform by which to receive funds. Nobody's thinking about that in the
Yeah.
U.S., right?
There's so many ways that Flutterwave could scale as well. There's a fellow I want to introduce you to. His name's Guy Kim Gang. He runs a.
We chatted actually.
Oh, good.
And you made the
He's
intro,
the
by the
headiest
way.
one.
No,
I
you made
should-
the
I should
intro.
know these
Just to be
things.
clear, you made the intro. We
Yeah.
chatted, and it was a great conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
He intros so many people to so many people,
Yes.
you can't even
Yeah.
remember.
I mean,
It's
how's
like
he gonna
it's an
keep track of all
algorithm, but
that?
it's like dial-up speed. out
Speaking
here,
of
basically.
connectors.
He's the master.
So tell me, we're discussing Africa as far as like narrative and being able to scale, but you've had an amazing impact, Jimmy, on founders being able to achieve their dreams and grow and scale big time right here in the Valley. So what are some best practices that you could share with founders that to get them where they want to be?
Yeah, I love chatting with founders and going through some of the concerns they have. Fundraising is almost always top of mind. I mean, without the funds, you're concerned about basically you have going concerns. Is my startup even going to make it, right? So more times than not, the conversation is around fundraising. And more times than not, the conversation, what the founders think they need, almost always, and I'd love to get kind of the insight of others as well. What I have found is most founders think that if I put them and make the warm intro to them and the investor, that's all they need. They don't need anything else. I'm good to go. My product is awesome.
Right.
My pitch is great. I don't really need your help. Just get me in front of that individual and that founder, that investor.
Mhm.
That's generally not the case, actually. It's
Yeah.
not that where I provide the most value. I can make an intro. That's easy. The connector part of it is I'm perfectly fine with that. But making the intro to the wrong person, or making the intro when you're not quite ready, or when your narrative doesn't quite fit and you haven't really fixed some of those problems, actually is a problem. So going back to storytelling, what I generally do with the conversation that I have with founders is to answer any questions they might have, and then see where I can provide the most value. We'll generally go over the pitch. Maybe I'll add a couple of insights about what I think will work better. We'll talk about best practices around how to run an effective process. So I typically say the best things to do when you're running a process is to think about two things. One is create FOMO. So you need to have as many conversations in a shorter period of time as possible and create this runaway train effect that my fundraise is moving along fairly rapidly. I'm about to finish my round and you better get on or get off because I don't need you. And the only way to do that is to have a lot of the right conversations. And then the other thing, if you push that FOMO, that's one piece of it. If you have the forcing factor at the end, milestones that are basically saying, hey, I'm a Techstar startup and we're about to have demo day. And I have these milestones and I'm about to launch this. The press is about to come out for this. Like, these milestones are things that push back. And it comes to this like, okay, are you going to make a decision or not?
Right.
Because as an investor, we have every incentive actually to not write you a check.
Yeah.
Because the longer I look at a startup, the longer I know about the startup, the more I de-risk my own investment. So you have to force me actually to write a check.
Assuming you're also going to get the same terms though, because that can change.
Well, so that's where the forcing comes in, right?
Yeah.
Hey, terms are going to go up. Things are happening. I'm going to sign this big merchant. Things are happening. Are you coming on board? So you've got to kind of push them along this process. And if you run an effective process, your chances of success are higher. It's not guaranteed, but it certainly helps.
Right. And then that process probably changes. Like if you're talking to Sequoia versus Greylock versus Andreessen, they want to see different things, or is it generally the same?
I mean, I think FOMO affects everyone. But then again, Sequoia does. I mean, I spoke to one of the partners there, I won't say whom, but he basically told me at one point in time, he said, look, I do like 2 deals a year, right? Are you good enough to be one of the 2 deals?
Wow.
Right? So they, of course, will still get FOMO in some of these deals, but at the same time, there's Sequoia, everyone comes to them, right? So, and Andreessen and all these amazing firms that are out there, they have a lot of deal flow. They certainly have a lot more conversations they have. But at the end of the day, if you are a hot startup with a lot of great investors, they're all jumping on board, investors will want to be a part of that.
So first and foremost, if anybody wants to hop in and ask these guys a question, feel free. Peter, you can drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, let me do that right
Okay, thanks. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that to say, I think another little facet of what Jimmy's describing is that's the piece of coaching that an emerging market with entrepreneurs who, these are not, the vast majority of these folks that are founding companies and doing it are not Stanford B school grads or, even, San Jose State grads. A lot of these guys are grinding. They're inventing. They're innovating based off of their own knowledge. Now, sometimes some of them, like in the companies in Renew's portfolio, we have people that, went to Duke and then came back to Addis, right? And there's those stories. But what he just described is a process of strategy that they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know because that's not their ecosphere. They're thinking, I have a product, I believe my market can fit this product, and I want to go pitch it to people because if they believe in it, then they can get it. Well, that's like step 1, 2, and 3, but he just described steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are really important to get the check cut.
Right.
And I think that's something that they don't have line of sight into because it's not, how could they if it wasn't their experience,
I
right?
think we need to do some events.
We should, let's do it. Let's do it.
Speaking of which, can you share for our audience a little bit about Renew and what you're building?
Yeah, Renew's the brainchild of a longtime friend of mine, Matt Davis, and his co-founder and COO, Laura Davis. And they're really fascinating. Started in Addis and really went to support entrepreneurs and help build as operators with the companies, be an investor, and then help operate the companies. And over the years have pivoted to now much more of a traditional VC model where they find and identify founders with great ideas and then invest in them. My new initiative that I'm championing as an investor and an advisor to Renew is setting up councils, sort of advisory councils that pour into to some of our top tier portfolio companies. So on the council, I'm trying to find somebody who's a product expert, somebody who's a strategy and fundraising expert, and then a leadership and coaching expert, so that when we give this advice to these founders, we're all in the same room talking, so that if you're a founder, I'm not giving you this product roadmap advice that totally would mess up the strategy and fundraising, right? Burn too much cash,
It's aligned. I see.
Yeah. And I'm using it for volunteers. I'll use this as an opportunity to pitch. I'm really looking for more tech entrepreneurs in the Valley who have a heart for emerging markets and who really believe that I do. I think you'd have to believe that the best path forward for Africa to gain equity and opportunity for all is through business and commerce. And if you do believe in that and you have some bandwidth for this, I'm seeking to bring more of these volunteers in and ultimately recruit them into more invested folks in the idea. But just to start with pouring into some of these entrepreneurs, and we have a dozen or so portfolio companies that we really believe in, and we believe less in the company and more in the founder and in the passion and commitment that they have. And we'll see what happens.
So if folks are interested, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, love to talk. If you're passionate about Africa, particularly East Africa, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, man, that's I'd love to take a trip with you.
Beautiful.
So any excuse I can get there. Right?
So we have some
That's
questions
amazing.
from the audience. I'll start with Carlos. He said, FOMO is a great tool, but how would you use it to grab new business if it's cold outreach? How do you generate FOMO quickly without ruining your ethics, basically?
Yeah, so I think the FOMO conversation for my example is primarily for fundraising as it relates to conversations with, let's say, merchants. So day in, day out, I'm talking to merchants and having conversations about how we can provide the right infrastructure for their support. My core kind of the North Star for me isn't necessarily to create FOMO for them to jump on and sign a contract with me. The way I generally talk to them is always about value. What are we providing that helps your business? What are we doing that helps you continue to build what you're trying to build, but to help you expand and grow in the markets you're looking at? East Africa, for example, right? So how can we, as a infrastructure partner to you, give you what you need to be able to keep doing your business? And if we are successful, then everyone is successful, because as you grow and as you have more customers, more transactions, and do better, ultimately we're doing better as well, right? So it's really for me about value.
Thank you. Well put. So help us understand a little bit about due diligence. Ravi, who's the founder of Boardwalk, he's just off camera here. We were just talking. He said that due diligence is actually to some degree disintegrated over time, and we're kind of seeing that with what's happened with Elizabeth Holmes and some other marquee examples. How do firms in Silicon Valley approach due diligence, and how could we improve it?
That's a tough one. There's been quite a few examples of fraud. And I think we can all think through some of the more recent ones. And I think the natural reaction, and the natural reaction is, how did that happen? If you, a very smart investor from a well-respected firm, had gone through the paperwork, reviewed their numbers, you should have noticed something. $8 billion missing, for example. Seems like someone looking through the numbers and truly doing due diligence would have noticed. I don't know exactly what happened to all of these. Sure. I don't know if the process has gotten worse. But back to our conversation about FOMO, I think that sometimes FOMO in a round that's already closing with some people you respect and know will drive some people to make decisions without actually doing the due diligence. So probably not everybody on that cap table actually read through every document. Actually, I can probably guarantee that not everybody looked through everything. Now, certain people certainly did, but not everybody did. Now, if you're really good at driving that kind of FOMO, you might have been able to get people to jump on board without them actually doing their job of fully doing due diligence. So that could have been a contributor. But at the end of the day, I think I think the due diligence process, at least from what I've seen, still roughly the same. It's just that we've had these like really big blowups and really big instances where we start questioning, how that happened.
Yeah. Do you think it's become more important as technology? It pretty much becomes a part of every aspect of how
I think
technology
it's become
works?
Particularly top of mind for people, given the huge blowups that have happened. Yeah. The amount of money that people lost in just FTX and Luna alone is massive. And then you really take that, just look at the crypto space and how much money was poured into it. The crypto space is rife with abuse and a lot of bad players, right? But they're not the only ones. There's certainly a lot of things that are going on there, but it's not just that space. All across, all kinds of different industries. I was talking to an investor recently about another company he had invested in where the founder took the money and actually used it on other things, right? There's a lot of that type of stuff there's bad actors. And unfortunately, one, not all the due diligence can get all of that information, but two, sometimes maybe you haven't done the proper due diligence because of other factors.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Jimmy just said. I would say I have a very different take on this though. I think diligence is very contextual, right? If you're looking at a SaaS company, I love Craft Ventures and David Sachs and the way he's just a very, very, very smart guy in my opinion. And if you're looking at the companies he's investing in, the technology, the actual stack has to work.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it's not worth investing in, right? I'm not smart enough to figure that out, and that's why I'm not a partner at a big Silicon Valley venture capital firm, but I'm fascinated with, and I'm passionate about, and I think there's an opportunity to make a massive difference in the world by investing in people and investing in markets where you know there's a need. And I'm not a qualified, and I think I just have to operate off of a premise that there's a whole bunch of opportunity that isn't really contingent on deep dive diligence on crypto technology. I bought like $1,000 of Bitcoin and lost it and decided that's not a spot for me.
Right.
That's not a place for me. Right? I'm not gonna be throwing that money there, right? But if you think about some of these emerging markets, we don't need to invest $650 million of a bunch of venture capital money into a iffy-ish technology, and we don't need to do it in a hurry because those guys over at Sequoia are doing it. Andree's got to throw it in. Let's get there. Let's get FOMO on this, right? I have FOMO for people that are hurting in the world who don't have equal access to opportunity. I have FOMO for places where girls don't get to go to school. I have FOMO for people where they have corrupt dictators who run entire countries like despots. That it's terrible conditions for people because there's not a way to make a buck. There's not a way to feed your family. And so for me, I really wish we could change some of the culture. I want to stand up on a box and jump up and down for some of these people that are printing money in the valley, creating, investing in new SaaS companies, and they're experts in all this. How about they take some of those proceeds? I know I'm not trying to sound like Elizabeth Warren here, but I mean, why don't they take just some of the opportunity and gamble it on people that are really great, where of course you're wanting an ROI.
Yeah, do good and do the right.
Plug in
well.
to a place and stop focusing on whether or not you can make another billion. Take a small percentage of your portfolio, invest it in an area where it could do massive good, and be less focused on. I'm sick of hearing about Elizabeth Holmes. I don't care.
Right.
That's not going to define the future. That's some bad acting that happened in the past, and people face justice. I want to focus on the opportunity to change an entire nation.
Right. Is there some?
By the way, I don't say that to diminish all that.
No,
I'm just,
I do agree.
Everybody has to have a passion, right?
Yeah. And if you're passionate about certain causes, and there are entrepreneurs, solid individuals working to solve that, support them.
to
Yeah.
add them.
Absolutely. I think that's a great cause. Yeah.
Um, are there lessons that you learned, or can you draw parallels with your time in DC and working for the Senate? Actually, first and foremost, can you clarify a little bit about what you did in the communication space?
Sure. I've had 20 years of a career in communications, a decade in the U.S. Senate, serving 3 different senators, and then a decade working for tech companies, a publicly traded company, a venture-backed company, and a big publicly traded company. I learned a bunch in all of them. Made some mistakes in all of them, and but most importantly, met a lot of great people.
Yeah.
And during in both of those sort of worlds, I got a chance to plug into Africa, and in the Senate, my senator was kind enough two of the different senators I worked for was kind enough to sort of loan me to the State Department to do training, media relations training, and political organizing training for operatives in Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda.
That's right.
And Sierra Leone, one trip. And so I just got a little bit of a taste of it. And then as I got more and more plugged into the tech ecosystem, and I just have sort of a remaining heart for Africa. I've tried to combine some of the connector aspects with Africa, and I'm just more and more convinced. I am also married to the smartest person I know, who's a foreign affairs expert and worked in the Senate on the Foreign Appropriations Committee for a long time. And I'm just convinced that we aren't taking advantage of a ton of smart brains. And there's a massive market opportunity in developing markets that we focused on as a government governments in form of an aid kind of model that is broken.
As opposed
And-
to teaching somebody to fish. and then
Yes,
giving them
totally.
the fish.
And by the way, if you want to do aid, I'm all about aid, but let's do it like, for example, let's fund incubators,
Yeah.
right? Let's do that with aid. That's cool. And then the free market will create real jobs. Or in fact, at Renew, we have several different grants to help spark entrepreneurship. So we go and apply for those, and we leverage those funds to get companies off the ground. And then we hope and expect that private investors will see that spark and want to turn it into a flame.
Hmm.
So
You introduce new a safe route to a new.
These are far out of the ballpark. So their ad tech is what is not interesting, but changes how you. In fact, one of the story the world he had interested in today. It has when we exist. No. It is now these amazing companies, right? So it's formative money, but
our venture capitalist alters. I can't watch.
come on,
right? HD.
like standard def has shifted.
Now you get it goes that with that. You can buy, right? And I'm on a mission.
Hello.
Right, hire versus buy.
Sorry, guys. Okay, and we're back.
We're back. So we were just talking about technology, both good and bad. And we kind of went off on a tangent there when we were off. But yeah, I mean, technology, how it's helped me is that all information is online. Yeah. You can find out just about anything about any company that's publicly available, and you'll know what their plans are that has been publicly stated. And you can also find out more about what the company is doing, what the company uses as an infrastructure, how much payment volume you should be expecting. So yeah, there's a lot of good information out there to find the right customers, but it boils back to who are the customers you really want to kind of seek out, and then creating a plan to go after that pipeline.
Gotcha. And always using data so we can measure.
Use data, yeah.
Okay. We're gonna have Jules from Conscious Conversations join in just a second here. But while we wait for Jules to join, can you, I'm sure you get some all sorts of founders. Who have you seen recently that's really been inspiring for you from an entrepreneurial perspective?
So we've been talking a lot about, and I'd love to hear your most inspiring one as well, but we've been talking a lot about Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in Africa, right? I'm working at an African startup, but certainly have gotten to know a lot more. I've now had a chance to travel there. But the recent one is a company called SmallSmall. They're addressing a massive problem in Nigeria for housing. What's shocking to me when I had a conversation with Tunde about this was that people have to pay for an entire year's worth of their rent up front. And that's because all these young people who are coming back from universities trying to get a job, or people who have gotten jobs, are being asked to pay for an entire year's worth of their rent up front before they can get an apartment. Now, I know when I got out of college, if you asked me to pay for a year's worth of my rent, I don't have a place to live.
Right.
And that's actually what's happening. And the reason it's happening is because the credit information is not available. I don't know if I can trust you. The landlords then don't have a trust. They don't know if they can collect any money or what's going to happen. So the whole kind of system is very broken. And so he's trying to build an infrastructure and a solution to help address housing, which to me is an amazing thing. If you don't have a place to live and you're working at Flutterwave or somewhere else, like, that's tough as a new grad. So it's really cool that they're building that.
That's rule number 2. Same question.
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm probably driven by a lot of emotion on this because I just get so inspired by all these people who are grinding, right? I mean, we have this young lady who's CEO of a company called Blue Pass in Kenya who's trying to digitize ticketing for transportation across Kenya, mostly on trains. We have a young man who's founded a company called Taraki in Ethiopia that's trying to create gobs and gobs of audible content for people to listen to in Aramaic. We have a company that's doing the Warby Parker of Kenya and Rwanda and Uganda. Believe it or not, like it's fascinating to me to
spoke
see.
to them. Actually.
Really? Okay, well,
so.
is that okay? But I'll give you.
I remember talking to them.
Stay away from that. No, I'm sorry. The one company that really fascinates me because I like the product. I love the entrepreneurs and the founders, but I'm more fascinated just personally by understanding and learning the problems they're trying to solve. And one is called Mputi. And it is, most of Africa is still an agrarian society, right? Especially East African. And it's funny because we're talking about like the Kampala or Kigali or Nairobi centers or Dar or Addis, where there's tons of smartphone penetration. There's tons of more sophisticated consumers than we in the US tend to know or think about. But there's still gobs and gobs of people that are living without power sometimes in a village and farming, right? And they're subsistence farmers. So how do they actually commercialize anything, right? So there's I've probably looked at 24 companies in the last year that are doing entrepreneurial, they're trying to build companies around being the middleman between collecting agrarian products, getting them to a market, creating a co-op, somehow getting them to the urban spaces to sell. And I just think that's a massive opportunity in undeveloped markets everywhere. I personally have seen it in East Africa, but I'm sure everywhere. So to me, I'm inspired less by good companies, because I think there's not enough signal sometimes to really tell that, and much more around macro solutions. I love hearing about Jimmy's work with just payments. You know, how do we do that? We think of payments now like, oh, it's this app to pay. No, that's like the tail end of this issue. How do you like connect all the dots to create a pipe, right?
Like backs up to Swift, probably.
Totally, right? And a lot of things, if you go to a restaurant, you're thinking, no, do they have Toast or do they have Square, right? Well, this is like the Square, those are individual like processing entities that still require lots of inputs and outputs, right? And so building that is a real, I just love the big, hairy problem that's going to loosen so much additional entrepreneurship.
You're right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love the answer. So Jules, welcome. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you guys, and that tail end of the conversation that I just hopped in on sounds
Give me one.
so insanely
second.
fascinating.
Let's see.
Can you hear me?
She may or may not be able to hear us, but we
Yes,
can hear
no.
her.
Yeah.
Hi.
Now we can hear you.
Hey, Jules.
Hey,
Welcome
Jimmy.
to Silicon Zombies.
How you guys doing?
Doing great. So Jazz, to have you here, we've been doing conscious conversations for probably maybe 4 or 5 episodes now.
Yep. Quickly becoming a fan favorite.
So welcome, and please tell us a little bit about what you built.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. I thought it was so sweet, Nick, that you reached out to have me on. And I just want to say the tail end of this conversation that you guys were just having is so insanely interesting. And I would love to hear more about it. So at some point in the future, that sounds really like you guys are doing amazing things. So Jimmy, hi, good to see you too.
Good to see you.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you guys know, I am the founder of Conscious Conversations. Nick is a good friend of mine who has been so generous in bringing the deck on his own accord onto his podcast, and he asked me to join in today. So as you guys have seen before, this is the deck, and I have the privilege of picking the question for the end of this podcast. So guys, are we ready?
Let's do it.
We're ready.
Okay. So here we go.
Full disclosure, I have no idea what we're doing here.
Good.
So I'm just checking to see if
That's
my stress
that's
level
even
is-
better.
Oh, no.
I just got an alert that my heart is racing. So fire away. We're your huckleberries here.
Yeah. It's pretty PG rated, don't worry.
Okay.
That's always a good indicator.
Yeah. I'm coming out with a different deck that's a little different.
Could be interesting.
Okay, so the question for all of you guys today is, what do you think the world will be like 50 years from now?
50 years from now, what's the world going to be like?
Also, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to chime in, feel free to click the link and join as well.
What's the world going to be like in 50 years? That's crazy to think, like, just how much innovation and growth there's been even in the past like 10 to 20 years. What's going to be like?
Well, we're definitely going to have a new type of computing because with traditional computing, we have about 28 years before we hit the physics wall.
Yeah.
So that's going to happen.
Do you think there'll be a quantum leap in computing?
Yeah,
he's not impressed.
Yes, there's going to have to be.
Yeah.
But maybe not just quantum, but there's also other types of computing as well, like more analog style. So both, it'll be very interesting to see what happens on that front in robotics, in computing, and that's going to naturally lead to AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the scary kind of AI? Should we be concerned? Are we getting closer to Judgment Day?
But my personal thoughts on that one is like, if you just treat your AIs nice, that won't happen, because if you look at like a lot of the sci-fi around this all of this happens because there was a period of time where humans were dicks to robots.
But maybe we'll become cyborgs, like no longer just humans, but we can leverage technology to integrate into who we are to be able to compete against the AI.
So then we won't be dicks because we'll like see some people who are half human, half robots, and then we'll like.
Do you think there'll be like
humanize them.
like classism based on like
Oh, there definitely
muggles
is.
and non-muggles? It's just Harry Potter.
I'm saying I'm hearing be nice to your AI.
Okay.
Be nice to all your digital. Like I think Alexa when
Yeah.
providing the information.
Okay. What a sweetheart you
So
are.
hopefully they remember this when they take
Alexa's
over.
gonna spare you, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Because I was always nice.
But
Thank you for
there
being
there
nice.
is one
Jimmy,
point when you stop being nice, it's gonna know. because
I know
it's
that's
factor
true.
metrics.
I know. It has that history of everything I've ever said.
That's what you're thinking?
No.
All right.
I mean, for me, I think the world becomes smaller and smaller in terms of being able to conduct business, being able to travel. There's flights that will be shorter. There's opportunities to move money easier. Crypto, I'm still hopeful that the technology behind it actually helps and lends well to the fintech space. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I've talked a lot about how stablecoins can be leveraged for commerce and for other things. I do believe that as more and more of these things infrastructure and technology is being built, the difficulties, especially of doing commerce in Africa, of moving money, of something as simple as sending money to family back and forth is something so critical, but so difficult still today. The founder of Venmo, I had a conversation with him. He's also an investor of ours. And I remember he said to me, he said, look, because he's got family in Africa, he said, can you please build something to make this process easier?
Wow.
And I'm like, this is a guy who's clearly already built something to make moving money very easy. In the US, I use Venmo every day.
Yeah.
And he's saying, can we please build something to make it easier? So I think that the world becomes a place where we remove the barriers for travel, we remove the barriers for commerce, we remove these barriers, and hopefully get to a place where people can conduct transactions, can do commerce, can travel, can do things faster and easier. 50 years from now, hopefully.
That's beautifully put. Beautifully put.
I can't top that, but admittedly, I will say that my hope drives my answer more than an intellectual approach. And my hope is that we're a freer world, that's a more just world. And what just keeps coming to mind of mine is I heard a little, probably a TikTok repurposed on Instagram snippet the other day of a gentleman he's British, and he was giving a sentiment around climate change. And it was partly a statement against wokeism and sort of uber leftist thinking around climate change. And it was interesting. I personally like to subscribe to bold ideas loosely held, because I think we should all really be cognizant that we can change our mind, and we should. And if we're too rigid, I think we miss a lot in life.
But you don't want to be so open-minded that your brains fall out, right?
And I think that leads me to my point. I think that 50 years from now, truth is going to emerge on a lot of things that we don't understand right now. And I think we've taken a really terrible approach to addressing climate change, which is an existential threat. We've done it through carbon offsets. We've done it through regulation. We've done it through taxation. I think they're all really, really, really crappy ways to try to change the world. And the point being, if you look at where the UK has aggressive climate goals and changes in regulation, and they're responsible for 2% of the world's emissions. The UK can do anything they want to constrain their economy and inhibit their citizens, and they're not going to impact climate change at all. Climate change is coming from undeveloped markets in China, in Asia, in Africa, and in Asia, actually in South America. And those people are traditionally poor. And if you tell someone as a parent, if you're a parent, you can emit a huge ball of emissions into the earth, and it's a massive, massive amount of carbon. You can stick that into the earth or help your child. Most people are going to select emitting some emissions, right, over helping their child, and trying to connect this to, really finding ways that technology and innovation can proactively solve some of our biggest challenges, instead of looking at a microcosm and trying to regulate our way out of it and meddle in the markets. I think that's going to be the evolution. And maybe we go back to COVID and look at the way we address some of that. There's a lot of stuff where I'm just hoping that 50 years from now, some truth has prevailed and we've found the right path to address some really big threats.
What do you think will be one of the dividing factors of incentivization? Making sure that people do the right thing, not because it's the right thing for them, but as on a whole.
Yeah, personally, I think there's going to be some sort of woke approaches here that I hate to say it, that are going to get smashed. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to find out that maybe, the people who sacrificed a whole bunch to drive an EV or take out their grass, I think there's going to be some facts that just come to play here where we think, oh, I was really stressing about this and I thought I was making a big difference, but now it's proven that actually isn't the real way to address this on the macro, right? When I'm not going to tell people not to take a shower in California because we're lacking water, when only 10% of water is residential use and 90% is agriculture. So where do we go solve the real problem, right? And that has to be depoliticized, has to be less blame, less it's your fault, less I'm going to tax you, less you're the idiot, you hate the environment, less that, and more let's all figure out how to solve this at a systemic level where we're leveraging the best brains we have in a way that's not about blame and fault and punishment, but more about solutions. And I know that's really hard in the world we're in,
but it can be done.
I think 50 years from now, we're going to if we don't, we're screwed.
Yeah.
So
right. You spoke real briefly about water usage in the agriculture space. And there's a really neat company. In fact, Felix Baum, a mutual friend of ours, is involved in where they're using sound waves to make plants grow faster, like 50% faster, and use half the water usage. Really cool opportunities and
actually,
technology.
Speaking of water again, there's some interesting stuff about Day Zero in South Africa, actually, and how basically they were saying, look, we're going to have issues with water. We're not going to have water. So we're going to basically not give anyone free water anymore. That was the Day Zero. And when that kind of woke everybody up, everybody started to make changes.
Wow.
And it got to a point where that day zero that was imminent, months away, let's say, is now being pushed back years because everyone changed their behavior. Like, what is it? And to your point, what's going to incentivize real change? Right? Is it taxes and whatnot that hasn't shown to work, or is it something else? Like, we need to really like rally behind something to make real change, because otherwise we just keep wasting everything. I mean, we waste all kinds of stuff every day. We don't even think about it.
Yeah. So, Jules, did you want to chime in and answer the question as well?
Yeah, why not? I actually had a question for you guys. If I could have a follow-up question to the one I just asked, is that okay?
Sure.
So my follow-up question to what you guys have already mentioned, one of you touched upon it already, is what gives, yes, you gave you an opinion of what the future is going to look like in 50 years, but what gives you hope for what the future is going to look like? You know, because a lot of us, I feel like, are kind of in a place of like, this is a scary time to be alive. Climate change is here. We're not really sure what the future, you know, a lot of us in the Bay Area got a taste of what climate change is bringing these past few weeks with all the rains coming down and things like that. So I think a lot of us really need a little bit of hope for what the future could look like. That being said, to give my very short answer to the question I just asked, I think there's going to be a lot more people moving out of cities and buying their own land and trying to be self-sustaining. I think that's going to be like a big thing that's going to be happening in the future generations. Like, I see a lot of Gen Z right now kind of like giving up the 9 to 5, giving up the corporate work, and really wanting to just get back to basics, which I think is incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's my very short answer to that question.
Yeah,
But back to you guys. Hope for the future. What do you see?
What gives you hope, Steve?
I think for me, I think it's interesting. You know, I once helped, was on the early-ish team of a company that was trying to do social media differently and connect people who didn't know each other based on geography, close, next door. And it was a really kind of crazy idea, right? Because social media was where you connected with all these people you knew and you could share things and get to be better friends, I suppose. And that's proven to have some detrimental impacts. But the idea of Nextdoor was to connect you with people you didn't know, but who you had a really lot of important context that you should know, right? In a flood, you need your neighbor's canoe, right?
Sure.
I say that as a joke, but it's actually true,
Yeah.
right? What gives me hope is that I think that we learn. I have to hope that we learn, and we see some of these things. You were mentioning some of the depth of mistakes that were made in crypto and other places. I think we learn. And I think we look back, you know, I like to watch, I'm a big sports fan, and I like to look back and see, you know, how coaches saw different tactics working, and they invented something, they pivoted, they evolved, and they got better. And I just have to believe that we're going to be better because I think there's a human yearning to get better and to make things better. And so, you know, I think what the most important thing is to not focus on blaming whose fault it is, but work together to solve it. So I
love
hope.
that.
I hope.
Also, if you look at the average, the standard of living, even in like the last 100 to 50 years has been remarkable.
Yeah.
Like the average age in the turn of the century was 32. Now it's like probably almost 90, something like that.
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is that we are seeing that important issues because of the flow of information, because of facts and information transferring. People are becoming more attuned or realize the importance of these things. Climate change, you know, years ago, people can scoff at it and, you know, basically make jokes about it. I think most people actually recognize there's, you know, certainly something here. Many folks maybe aren't doing anything to address it, but at least they're aware of it. So I think the information flow and the fact that people are actually educating themselves to some of these bigger issues gives me hope that there are people out there who care enough to do something about it, who will make the change, who will address the 90% and make some changes that will actually impact a lot of people.
Mission-led growth. I love it. Thank you both so much for being here. It's been absolutely wonderful having you both on.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much, Jules, for hopping on as well. Join us next Tuesday at Pacific, where we'll have more of the best brains in the Bay. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Quick shout out to Nicodex and Primero Negocios. Check them out in the show notes. And thank you so much. Take care, guys. All right. Well.